Hey there, Scott here from Social Energy Presents, and we'd like to thank you for joining us. Please like, share, and subscribe to support this and other great content. Our guest today is Rocket Norton, a Vancouver musician, author, and entrepreneur who's left an indelible mark on the North American music scene. Rocket began his career as a talented drummer for multiple renowned bands, including the legendary Seeds of Time, the Juno-award winning band PRiSM, and Revolver, the world's best Beatles band. Not only did Rocket mesmerize audiences with his exceptional drumming skills, he also showcased his versatility as a leader of the house band Rocky and the Jets on CKVU-TV's Vancouver show for several years. Rocket's impact extends well beyond the stage. He authored the captivating book Rocket Norton, Lost in Space, which delves into his captivating journey within the vibrant Vancouver music scene. In a remarkable collaboration, Rocket joined forces with Al Harlow and John Hall of PRiSM, Bryant of PRiSM Chilliwack and the Headpins, and Ray Ayotte, the founder of Ayotte Drums, forming a sensational group known as the Authentics. Together, they rekindled the magic of their classic songs, treating fans to an unforgettable experience. One of Rocket's proudest achievements is the creation of the rock opera titled Visions, Mission Andromeda. This groundbreaking masterpiece was recorded with the Vancouver Symphony Orchestra and mesmerized audiences during its captivating performances at the Vancouver Planetarium. Beyond his musical endeavors, Rocket found joy coaching baseball. With his passion for the sport, he developed a highly successful video program called How to Coach Baseball to Kids, which has sold thousands of copies, inspiring coaches and young players alike. Rocket Norton's creative talents also extend to the realm of literature, having authored 5 books. And today, Rocket joins us from his home for an intimate look back at his career and to bring us up to speed on what he's been working on next. So sit back, relax, and get ready, as Social Energy now presents you with your Backstage Pass.
So here I'm sitting in a situation where I've known you for how many years now? I think me and you met back in probably 1980, 81, somewhere in there.
When did you come to Vancouver?
Well, I don't recall meeting you when you're in PRiSM. I don't recall meeting you at that point. I might have, but what I really remember meeting you was basically around the time you were forming the Ron Tabak Band. And,
right. Okay.
And you came out to see Michael and I play with Trauma.
Yeah.
And you asked me to play guitar. And actually, that's a good place to start. Because a lot of people know the story of PRiSM, but we'll get into that. But now, in this situation, PRiSM has ended. Now, what happened? Why did PRiSM end? Like, what's your story on that?
That's a complicated story.
I mean the PRiSM with Ron Tabak, of course.
Yeah, of course. That's the only one that really mattered. It's so incredibly complicated that I wrote a book about it, and it's 555 pages long. Really? So it's a complicated story.
Well, is that a new book?
All the way back to the Seeds of Time, which was the original band, and there were some complications and some personnel conflicts to go all the way back to when we were teenagers. But what really happened at the end of the PRiSM thing was 2 things. We were difficult to work with, and Bruce Fairbairn, who started as a producer by forming the PRiSM band, and had a lot of success with PRiSM, was now getting in the sights of other record companies that wanted him to produce other shows or other bands. So he was kind of losing interest in us and starting to look at other projects, and he was our undisputed leader. So as he started to kind of look at other projects, that kind of left us kind of on our own devices, and we weren't very good that way. We needed a strong leader like him. The second problem was also one of the biggest reasons for our success, and that was Ron Tabak, our vocalist. Ron really had an incredible gift, and his voice was amazing. But he started having some personal problems and some trouble to the point where it was almost impossible to work anymore. That was, I think, the major reason, because we probably could have found another producer. Maybe not someone like Bruce Fairbairn. He was amazing, but there were lots of amazing producers out there. So, but Ron's problem was at the time unfixable. Everybody tried, and nobody got anywhere, to the point where we really couldn't write, we really couldn't record, and so the band broke up.
Well, because, like, of course, Spaceship Superstar came out, which was a Jim Vallance product. Well, basically, who produced it? Bruce Fairbairn produced the album. Jim Vallance wrote most of the songs on the first album, correct?
Right.
Yeah. And Spaceship Superstar was a massive hit. What were the other hits off of that album? Open Soul Surgery?
Open Soul Surgery, funny. Open Soul Surgery was the song that Jim Vallance wrote, that got us a record deal with GRT Records, a Canadian record company. They loved that song, and they signed the band on the strength of that song. But Spaceship Superstar was the first hit. There was also a song called "Take Me to the Kaptin" with a K, Kaptin with a K, and that was a pretty big hit. And a ballad called "It's Over" was also quite a big hit. So we had between those singles that helped us have a big success with the first album, and that launched the band.
I didn't realize that, or I forgot that "It's Over" was on the first album, because that's such a sophisticated song. What a beautiful tune!
It's a beautiful song. Jim Vallance wrote it as a kind of and Bruce Fairbairn's wife's name was Julie. I think that's where he got the name. I don't know if he actually wrote it for her particularly, but it's a beautiful song.
Yeah. And now, how large was Spaceship Superstar as a single? Was it big in the States as well?
I don't know if it was big. GRT, when we signed with GRT Records, we signed originally with them. And then by this time, Bruce Allen was involved as our manager, and he immediately got us signed up for the rest of the world with Ayotte Records, which was a giant German company, giant in Europe, and were making inroads wanted to make inroads into the U.S. And we were really their first act. They had a couple others. I can't even remember who they were, but we were the one that they really pushed.
And so now we're back. We're back at the beginning of PRiSM, which is probably fine, because we were talking about the end. But this is good too. Okay, so PRiSM starts, and it's basically the brainchild. Well, Jim Vallance. Please correct me if I'm wrong. Jim Vallance was writing demos. He found the voice. I think Ron was in a band called Stanley Steamer at the time.
Ron was really just floating around. And Bruce Fairbairn and Lindsay Mitchell, the guitar player, who had been the guitar player in the Seeds of Time for 10 years with myself and John Hall, Steve Wally, and Jeff Eddington. The two of them went out and saw Ron in a lounge, like a Holiday Inn lounge somewhere. And I don't know what kind of material he was doing, but Ron knocked him out. I mean, they were blown away. So they brought it was the two of them. Bruce Fairbairn had Lindsay Mitchell. They brought Ron back into the band, and then Vallance was writing the songs. And in fact, I remember hearing the demo of Open Soul Surgery it just blew me away. No wonder GRT Records signed the band. Tremendous performance.
Wow. And that would have been probably on Jim's 8-track.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Crazy. Because I'm thinking, so Ron gets into the band, and there's all this success. Now, but there was, at the beginning, wasn't Tom Lavin involved on the first album, or did he play, or was he like part of the touring thing? Like, who actually played who played on the first album? I don't.
Lots of people. It was lots of musicians coming and going, because it was a demo. At that point, it was a demo project.
Right.
And then GRT signed it, and then they completed. Then the album got completed. And came out. Now, Tom Lavin is an incredible bass player. He's a multi-instrumentalist, just the most talented guy around. So he signed on to be the bass player. So now it was Ron Tabak on singing, on voice, Lindsay Mitchell on guitar, Tom Lavin on bass, John Hall, the keyboard player from The Seeds of Time, on keyboards, and me on drums. Jim Valance is an awesome drummer, but didn't want to be the drummer in the band. He wanted to be a songwriter, and it worked out for him rather well.
I'd say.
Yeah, and so that was how the band started. So we did, gosh, it must have about 6 months of touring all over the United States, like right away, on the back of the PRiSM album. So Spaceship Superstar was the single and did very well. Wasn't what you call a big hit at the time in the United States, but it gave us the backing to get on all kinds of tours, which Bruce Allen was responsible for. He had us working every night, different cities every night. I mean, we were flying around. We were in rented Oldsmobiles. We were in tour buses. We were in trucks and everything it took, to get to the next. I don't think we had a day off for 6 months. We got at the end of 6 months. We got back. It was around Christmas, and I think Tom Lavin wanted to start a different project, which he had probably wanted to do even before he started with PRiSM. And so he left to start the Powder Blues Band, which was also a phenomenal success and a wise move on his part. And he still has it running today, and it's fantastic. So we were without a bass player all of a sudden. And my really good friend, Al Harlow, when we were bouncing around Europe together, and two of us went over and partied in Europe for about 4 months previous to all this. And he once said to me that he'd been thinking of taking up the bass, just an offhand comment. So I said that to Bruce Fairbairn. I said, well, now we need a bass player. My friend Al Harlow has told me he'd like to play the bass. So Fairbairn immediately goes to see Al playing in some little gig and offers him the gig of playing bass in the PRiSM band. Al thinks about it overnight and goes, yeah, that sounds great. And so we started 1978 in the studio recording our second album. And we had that was the band that everybody came to know, the five-man band that was the face of the whole success of PRiSM.
Now, so did Spaceship Superstar land in 78 or 79?
77.
77. Okay, because I remember you guys coming in and playing 2 dates at the Body Shop. And I was at both shows because we were managed by Bruce at the time, I believe. So I went to see both shows. Now, Al was in the band at that point. Was that probably a couple of his very first gigs?
Yes, actually, that was 1978. I just remembered that we did that because it was the first time. No, I'm sorry, it wasn't the first time. It was one time before this. It was the second time I'd ever ridden in a limousine. And the memorable thing about it was that it was one of those stretch Lincolns that was enormous. It was the size of a house in the 70s. And it was the former limousine of the President of the United States. Well, I guess that was previous to Reagan. I don't know who that, Nixon, I guess. Anyway, I guess when they sold it to some company in Vancouver, and there we were, and that limousine took us to the body shop, and we played a showcase there, and that was where we were showcasing the See Forever Eyes album, which was our second album.
Wow.
And I can remember we played 2 shows. You said we played 2 shows.
Yes, yeah, it was. Yeah, you played a show, flipped the crowd, and played another show same night.
Okay.
Yeah. So I was going to say, you were talking about you and Al being in Europe, and I remember reading your book. By the way, if anybody hasn't read Lost in Space: The Rocket Norton Story, get it. It's one of the best books I've ever read in my life. Like I told you, I think on an email, I think I read it 3 times, and plus pieced through it a number of other times as well. I haven't touched it for quite some time, so there's going to be some facts that I'm going to be. But I was a huge fan of the book. Anyway, but there was a period of time where you and Al just up and went to France. Like
no, well, we went to London, but we ended up in many places, some of which I forget.
Now this is back way before PRiSM. This is when you guys are playing in club bands.
Oh yeah, way before. Seeds of Time, and Al had a band called the Wits Kids. He was a guitar player, singer, songwriter, performer. He's quite a showman.
Right. Well, he still puts on quite a show. I was going to say, so how did you raise the money to get to Europe?
That is a good question. Friends and family mostly. Al had no money at all when I got there. We were living on the street. Of course, he had a fabulous wardrobe. But I have no idea. I have no idea.
And you guys met up with a couple of girls there. Now, did you end up staying with them? Is that how that worked out?
We did rely on the good nature of a female company. I mean, we were 20-something years old, 23, I guess I was 22, 23. And yeah, we just hooked up and we got taken care of. Al was particularly good at this. There was lots of female companionship. You remember now, we grew up in an era called the Summer of Love. And the Summer of Love lasted about 3 years. It started in 1967 and it lasted about 3 years. It ended at the end of 1969, the beginning of 1970, and then began the Summer of Sex, which was an entirely different animal. So behavior, boys and girls' behavior in those days, it's unbelievable to people today, how we all, interacted with each other. I mean, and it became literally the Summer of Sex. I mean, everybody was sleeping with everybody, and there were no restrictions. There wasn't really anything to. People were, if you wanted to do it, you just did it, and then so it was a whole different attitude. People today hearing this kind of behavior might be kind of be shocked, as I am. As I say, in my defense, I think I might have made the whole thing up.
Yeah. So now, in and amongst all of this, Summer of Sex, Summer of Love, all that sort of stuff, there's the birth of the legendary now Seeds of Time, your band. Now, what year did the Seeds of Time form?
Seeds of Time, believe it or not, formed in 1965 in high school at the Winston Churchill High School, where I went to school in Vancouver. And actually John Hall was in that band and myself. And then Steve Wally, the bass player, joined. We were in like grade 10, I guess. And we had a couple of seniors, a couple of grade 12 guys that played guitars and sang. And then the drugs started. LSD showed up. It wasn't even illegal in those days. And, being 15, 16 years old, there didn't seem to be any harm in it. Nobody said it was bad for you. And we just started doing it. And the senior guys in our band didn't like that. They were on their way to university. They were, not going to be lifelong musicians. Whereas the other three of us, especially myself and John, I know for me, I knew this is exactly what I was going to do the rest of my life. So we got Lindsay Mitchell and a singer named Jeff Eddington, who was the first rock star I'd ever seen. Now, rock star hadn't even been invented yet, but he was just playing around town. And he had capital C charisma. And so that was the Seeds of Time. By 1967, that was the 5 members of the Seeds of Time. And we stayed together on and off, mostly on, pretty much until PRiSM started in 1977.
Wow. So Jeff Eddington and Lindsay Mitchell were in the same band together?
Yes, they were in a band called William Tell and the Marksmen. And Lindsay fired Jeff from the band because Jeff kept showing up stoned on acid to the rehearsals. So Jeff came and joined the Seeds of Time, and then we just realized that we needed a guitar player too. So Lindsay said, "Oh, well, I'll come and play with you guys." So even though Lindsay had fired him from the William Tell and the Marksman, the two of them ended up in the Seeds of Time, and we were together all those years.
I remember in your book, Lost in Space, the time when you first saw Jeff Eddington on stage, and it was like one of those. The sound of the heavens opened up to you. Yeah,
it was, and it was in a little community hall gig somewhere that William Tell and the Marksmen were playing, and John Hall and I, went over to see this crosstown band that were making, people were hearing about how good they were, and I walked in. There was like 40 people in the whole place, and there was the band. And I looked up there, and there was Jeff at the microphone, holding it in a way, sort of a Jim Morrison, that kind of like animal magnetism. Just all the greats, the Jim Morrisons, the Mick Jaggers. You can't take your eyes off these guys. I mean, they demand your attention, and Jeff was one of those kind of guys.
They have it. It's like locally, I think a person who has that is Dave Steele. David Steele can be on stage doing nothing, and you can't help but look at him.
Yeah.
He's one of those guys that just draws you right in. One of the greatest voices I think Canada's ever produced, and nobody really knows about him. They've heard him.
I did a gig with David Steele back in the 80s, and it was a piece of music that myself and John Hall and a guy named Skip Prest, who we'll probably talk about, wrote, and we played it with the Vancouver Symphony Orchestra, and we sold out the Queen Elizabeth Theatre. CFOX FM radio in Vancouver got behind it. Somehow we sold the whole place out. So there was 3,000 people there to see this thing, and I had David Steele was the singer. So the band comes out, and we do about a 15-minute piece, instrumental piece with the symphony. We're playing away on the stage. And then it comes time for the vocalist to start. And David Steele, who is unknown to everybody, comes out doing the Chuck Berry duck walk. Across the stage. The entire audience leapt to their feet cheering. Yes, David Steele, I think you could say, has charisma.
Yeah. He's an incredibly gifted singer, one of the best I've ever heard in my life. he reminds me almost of like a Bono. Bono could be up on stage doing nothing. You can't help but look at him as well.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, but I got to retrace back a few years ago. Now, it's possible that this happened around the time that you may have. There was something going on, because I remember hearing you on CFox Radio doing an interview, and the legendary Seeds of Time were getting back together again for something special. Now, I'm thinking this might have been in the 90s, maybe late 80s. And I remember they were talking about how they were saying, "Oh, you guys rehearsing a lot," and you said, "Well, if the rehearsing is anything like the way we used to rehearse, we would just lock ourselves into a dark closet with no light and see if we could all clap at the same time."
Yes, we actually did that. That's right. That's a true story. And there were drugs involved in original days. And in the 90s, at this time, we weren't. The drugs were long in the past. So I doubt if we could have pulled that off. See, the time never practiced. I never practiced a day in my life. No, we didn't have practices. We got together and wrote songs, once in a while, and we would just pick up songs. We would just show up at gigs and just start playing. Somebody would play a song. Maybe it was a top 40 song or a song by some obscure band from South America, whatever. And we never learned the song. We just played them. And even hits, like if we were to play a Doors song, Light My Fire, I never listened to. I mean, I listened to it on How Could You Help to Hear That Song? Great song. But I never sat down and learned the drum part. I just played it. And so the Seeds of Time were quite unique in that way. I don't know what it is we had, but people liked it. And so we kept doing it.
Well, you guys just used to travel all over the place. And you go into the interior BC somewhere, some small town, and just set up at the local band show without telling anybody and just start playing.
Yeah. Yeah. And then we would hire the local IOOF hall. I don't know what IOOF stands for, but some kind of little wooden hall in the center of town. And it usually cost about $3 or $5 to hire the hall. And we would draw up posters. We'd sit in a cafe in town and draw posters. Tonight, the Seeds of Time at IOOF Hall. And we charged $2. And, 60 people would show up, or 80 or 12 or whatever number. And we'd have enough money to buy some peanut butter and some bread and put some gas in the van. And then we go off to the next town and do it there. We went all the way to Halifax doing that in the summer of 1968, from Vancouver to Halifax, barnstorming from town to town, figuratively setting up a tent, putting on a show, collapsing the tent, putting it back in the truck. I used to sleep under the van at the side of the road. I didn't own a suitcase. I remember when they came to pick me up in the van, a little van with, 8 guys and all our equipment. And I had a brown paper bag with some socks in it. So once again, how did we survive? Well, we survived on the kindness of strangers. Everywhere we went.
That was the whole Summer of Love vibe, though.
That was the Summer of Love vibe.
Yeah. And, people sharing everything.
People shared. It was a beautiful thing. Clearly, with humans, that doesn't work. That's not humans' nature. So that's an unfortunate thing. When you look back on it, it was a wonderful experiment that blew up. It just didn't work. Because, by the 80s, all those hippies were driving BMWs and going to the Gap. So, it just didn't work. I wish it had.
And not wanting to share anything.
Yeah, you're right. People just showed their true colors. greed rules the world. We see it every day. Everything that's happening in the world is all based on greed. I, me, mine. Give me what I want. I don't care what you want. And communism, which is supposed to be the ultimate in that also proved didn't work. Right. Turns into a dictatorship.
Yes, because people, the greed, the communism ideal is actually utopia, but it'll never be that because there has to be people in power, and ultimately they become, like you say, it's the greed that takes over.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. All animals are created equal, but some animals were created more equal than others. That's George Orwell from Animal Farm.
Animal Farm. Yeah.
Animal House was a whole different thing.
Yeah, and much better.
Much better.
I was going to say, so you say the Seeds of Time started in '65. Now, if I'm not mistaken, did you not pick up the drums when you saw the Beatles play in '64?
That's correct.
So you were playing drums for about a year and started the Seeds of Time.
Yes. Actually, I started the band the day I got the next day after the Beatles played on the Ed Sullivan Show, I took my accordion. That's right. I played the accordion. I took my accordion to the music shop and traded it in on a snare drum and a cymbal. And I started a band the next day with my two friends that lived up the street. One of them played acoustic guitar and the other played piano. And we started the band, which lasted about 24 hours.
Right.
So, yeah, I had a band all the time, like just guys at school that somebody had an organ or something, and we would play it at parties. But until 1965, when the Seeds of Time sort of formed, that was a real band. We actually played gigs. And most of the gigs in those days were high school hops, sock hops and things like that, like at lunch hour. So we would have to take off school and go and play the gig and then come back for to school in the afternoon. There weren't a lot of gigs around, but it started. The thing is, I started playing drums. The only instruction I ever had was listening to my Beatle records. I would just come home from school and put on a Beatle record and play along to Ringo, and that's how I learned to play. And I never took lessons. I never practiced. I just did that. And then I had the band, and the band played quite a bit, the Seeds of Time band. And at some point, I just said to myself, I'm going to keep doing this. And they seemed to like what I'm doing. I didn't realize that I wasn't very good. It never occurred to me because that wasn't part of the vocabulary. I mean, we were just playing music, and people liked it. So there was no like, I'm not very good at this. I didn't doubt myself because I wasn't smart enough to doubt myself. If I had doubted myself, I probably would have become a dentist.
Were your parents supportive of it?
This is the interesting thing. My dad was an accountant, business guy, and my mom was a homemaker. This is the 50s, and then now into the 60s. The interesting thing for me in looking back at it is that my dad in particular never approved of it, but he always supported me. And at one point later in life, he said, I'm really glad you never went into business.
Isn't that great? So you have no siblings?
I have a sister that's 6 years older than me, and she married almost out of high school. So I hardly knew her. She's really nice, and her and her husband don't live in Vancouver. So, but when I was really little, she was my older sister, and we'd go on family trips and things together. But we were never what I'd call close.
Yeah, in all the years I've known you, I never even knew you had a sibling.
Yeah. She went off in a whole different world, and then that happened to me too. I mean, when the Seeds of Time took off on these barnstorming tours, and the first year we did it in 1967, I'm sorry, yeah, 67. We were all still in school, so we just did it in the summer. But so I was like on the road at 15, you know. I mean, so my life, my family, which was wonderful. You know, I sort of took off. I took off to join the circus, you know, and so the next 30, 40 years are just a blur after that.
So what were you like in school? Like as a young boy, like let's say pre-Beatles, were you a good student? Were you an average student? Were you just sort of just getting by, didn't care?
That is easy. I was a lousy student. I was the worst student in the school. I hated school. When my mother took me to first grade, took me up to school, you know, held my hand, took me in, sat me in the class, went home, I guess. And about an hour later, the school phoned my mother and said, "You're going to have to come back and get them." I was just sat there and cried. Like, I just hated school, never liked it, never understood it. And all the way through it, and got worse because as I got older and more confident in myself, I was never really confident, but more that way. Every time I'd be learning, obviously we like to learn how to count, you know, and how to you know, spell and how to, you know, write, reading and writing. Other than that, the rest of it just seemed meaningless to me, you know, even before music. Like, I just never really saw the point. I personally think that we should be teaching children from a young age a curriculum that prepares little people to become bigger people. I don't know if all this you know, history and all this stuff is all that meaningful. Now, we see that in some other countries very close to us who don't teach geography, for instance, you know, and they don't even know, you know, who's in the next state over or whatever sometimes. So I don't know, but I think there's a better way. I think there could be a much better curriculum for teaching than what we're still teaching the same stuff that they were teaching a couple of 100 years ago. You know, it's
well, and even that's starting to shift because we're seeing now that history is starting to change because they're realizing, like they say, history is written by the victors, you know?
Yeah, you're right.
So there's a whole bunch of history that gets washed out. And now you realize in the other history that's coming through, you're going, wait a minute, you know?
Yeah. So now we're going backwards. Now we're taking down statues of people because it got discovered that they did some bad thing. And if it hadn't been done properly, those statues never would have got put up in the first place. I'm not saying we should go back and take them all down, because the problem is that there so much. You nailed it. You know, like, we only learned the good history. We only learned the history that some people somewhere in a room decided this is what we're going to teach our people. And so much of what happened in the world 100 or 1,000 years ago wasn't we weren't given the straight goods. So
yeah, you mentioned the statue thing, and I often thought that statues coming down, okay, but really they should be repurposed. They should be in museums at the very least.
Well, that's right, because a museum doesn't need to be just for, you know, all these good things happen. I mean, that's one of our problems, is that we don't learn from our history. Why do we keep having wars when we know the wars don't work?
Yes.
They don't solve anything, they don't work. So why do we keep doing them? Why do hundreds of thousands, millions of people die in wars? And yet we keep doing it because we don't teach ourselves. We don't learn from our mistakes. We kind of brush the mistakes under the carpet and try to carry on with a brave face. Well, that doesn't help us.
Mm-hmm. Well, once again, it's like a lot of times what they say about wars is it's rich people using poor people, to win a game,
Well, yeah, yeah. I mean, it's funny when you hear that in the Middle Ages, or many hundreds of years ago, the life expectancy of humans was pretty short. That's not surprising when you realize, you think, in the year 950, there was nothing for anybody to do. There was no internet, no television, no movies. There was hardly any theater. With no book. When did Gutenberg invent the printing press? I mean, I can't remember. But anyway, what did people do? They had nothing to do. Let's go to war. I mean, let's have a war. I mean, it keeps people active, gets them outside, in the fresh air. I mean, no wonder, all the men died at like 20 or whatever they died at. And in a sense, we're still doing it. I don't see why we haven't learned from the mistakes.
It's a fascinating thing because it goes back to what we learn in school versus what we learn when we're out in the world. Like personally, I don't know how your school is. I don't even have my grade 10. I don't consider myself to be an ignorant person. Because I've read and I've taught myself through life what's gone on historically, what's gone on geographically, not as much as a scholar, but I mean, I certainly know more than the average Joe, which is amazing because I don't have the schooling to back it up. But, and the reason I say that is, so you graduated?
I did not graduate. What happened to me is I was in grade 11. And I was a passing student. I get B's and C pluses and stuff. I don't know how. Like, for instance, this really bothers me. Like, I'm in English class, and the teacher would read an excerpt from a passage from some book. And then the class was to give their opinion on what that meant, or what that mean to you. So I would say, oh, well, what that meant to me is this, this, and this. And then the teacher would say, oh, well, that's just wrong. That's not whatever. And I'm going, well, how can it be wrong? Because this is how I perceived it. So the person who wrote it, they wrote it, I'm reading it, this is what I'm getting out of it. And you're telling me that I'm wrong? How could I be wrong? Anyway, so what happened is, I'm in grade 11, I'm doing okay. It was at the end of grade 11, I get my report card. Now, during grade 11, I was singled out at school as a troublemaker because I had long hair, which meant, that I basically had kind of a Beatle cut, which when you look back at it, those early Beatle cuts were pretty short hair. It was just didn't have Brill cream in it. And so what they did to me is they wouldn't let me go to class because they said that I was disrupting the class just by being there. So when I had to come to school, otherwise I'd be truant and they could kick me out of school. So I had to come, and they put me in a little closet in the hallway by the nurse's office. And I had to stay in the closet for all the morning. I could come out at lunch, and then I had to go back in for the afternoon, and then I could go home at 3:00.
Good Lord. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, well, this happened. It went on for several weeks. And then a friend of mine and the band was a writer for a local newspaper, for the Vancouver Sun. She got wind of this and wrote an article on how they were basically torturing students at Winston Churchill High School. And so the whole thing blew up, and the principal of the school got retired. Didn't get fired, he got retired. This was right at the end of the school year, and I was allowed to go back to class. Well, they failed me in every class. And I said, well, look, I had passing grades. You weren't attending class, they said. I said, well, you wouldn't let me. You locked me in a room. Well, that was your decision, wasn't it? They said. And so they failed me and everything. And I had, instead of going to grade 12, I had to repeat grade 11. And I went for about 3 or 4 days because of my poor parents. I thought, well, this would just be too hard on them, so I'll just suffer through. I made it through about 3 or 4 days, and I said, I can't do this, so I quit. Now, the funny thing is, flash forward 40 years, and the alumni group or club or whatever it's called found me and asked me if I would come to the 40th reunion of class of 68, and would I be the keynote speaker?
Oh my God.
I said, yeah, okay, I'll do that. And I came. And so my thing was, it's totally fitting. I don't know if I'm allowed on the blog to say what I said.
You can say whatever you want.
Are we allowed to use language?
Of course.
Okay, so my opening line was, I come up to the podium and I got all my old school, mates out in the audience, and a lot of the old teachers who are now really old, sitting there. And I come up and I lean on the podium, and my first line is, "What the fuck were we thinking?" Brought the house down. And then I said, "It's totally appropriate that you have chosen me to be the keynote speaker at our 40th graduation anniversary, because I never graduated." And everybody knew the story of why. But yeah, that's what happened.
Interesting. That's incredible. So now, at the end of grade 11, you tried to repeat grade 11, gave up. So we're talking probably September of your grade 12 year, which would have been your grade 12 year. So yeah. What did you do when you quit school? What happened? What'd you do? Would you just work with your band straight on, or what'd you do? Any day jobs or anything?
No, we had 2 or 3 seats. 2 of the other guys in the band were already out of school. I think Jeff Eddington, the singer, had quit, and Lindsay Mitchell had graduated. So we kind of hung out, and there were a couple of other friends that I had around. Remember, this is the beginning of the whole sort of hippie thing. And so we kind of hung out. I watched a lot of, I Love Lucy on television in the mornings, and really didn't do a hell of a lot. It was not a good period, because I didn't know where I was going to be going in life. Like I'm 16, I guess. I really didn't know where I was going to heading now, because up till then I'd always thought, well, I'll graduate and I'll probably go to university and something, I'll do something. Now I said, okay, well, this is what I'm doing now. I'm a musician. Like, but did I practice? No. Hung out on street corners and smoked cigarettes mostly. And then, all through that year, I had a full-time girlfriend now who lived in North Van. So that was a whole day, trek to get over there and back. And it just whiled away. I can remember sitting on the dock of the bay, my Otis Redding. That was my kind of my attitude, just whistling, the time away. And then, of course, at the end of that school year, that's when we took off on that big barnstorming tour across the country, and ended up in Montreal, where we ended up living for about three months. Incredible scene there. We just loved it. The
first I heard of you, I remember seeing the old Vancouver show, and there's PRiSM in the Prime. And whenever there was, I realized why now, because I know all the members of the band, but I always found it odd that the drummer of the band was basically the spokesperson. You were the one that they always interviewed. You're the one that did all the TV things. And the reason I'm saying that is because I think you've always been articulate and smart. You're really good with social skills. You're really good on understanding how things work and stuff. So you were obviously always a very smart person. It's just that school was probably was not focusing on where you believed your focus should be.
Yeah. I mean, you think how difficult that would be, but we should be doing it. The thing with education, this was really driven home a few years ago. In the city of, or I guess the, I don't know what they call it, Washington, D.C., the District of Columbia. They had a baseball team. They still do, the Washington Nationals. And that summer, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, they paid a player $300 million for, I think it was a 10-year contract, so $30 million a year to play baseball. Right at that time, the teachers in Washington, D.C. were talking about going on strike because they were being paid below the poverty level. So we're paying a young man $30 million a year to play a game that he'd play for nothing. If you said, we're not going to pay you anymore, he'd say, well, okay, that's not very good, but I'm going to keep playing because he loves playing baseball. And yet you can't afford to pay teachers above the poverty line. There's something wrong with that. You can use it might be the same thing in the medical world too. I mean, the nurses and things. These are people that should be compensated for the importance of their work. And, those things aren't happening. So yes, the school system completely didn't get me. And I'm not alone in this. There are thousands and thousands of people like me that just school never got. And so, we just, in my case, I left school and I made the best of my life as best I could. Turns out I didn't need it. I didn't need school.
Yeah, essentially that's my story in a different way, but very close. My dad let me quit school to go on the road, and here I sit. So getting back to it, so your parents, your dad was an accountant, your mom was a homemaker. Now, I met your dad because he was Bruce Allen's accountant.
Yes.
Yes. So he had an office in Bruce Allen town. Is that correct, or was he bookkeeper?
How it happened is my dad was in the finance business, and their big business was financing car loans. And at a certain time, I guess around 1975 or 6, I'm not exactly sure, somewhere in the middle of the 70s, the government regulations changed to allow banks to loan money for cars, because I guess before that they couldn't do it. And so the company that my father worked for quite quickly started to go out of business.
Yeah, it becomes redundant.
My dad was 55 years old, a World War II veteran, a grade 8 educated guy. And he had gotten into the banking business after the Second World War, just because his friend, so they would have been 20-something years old, early 20s, I guess. And he got in. That's how he got into that business. So he didn't have a resume of any big education. He worked for this company for all those. He found himself out on the street at 55 years old, and he was despondent because nobody would hire him. I mean, he's just a 55-year-old bookkeeper. It's like there was no place for him. So meanwhile, I'm playing in all the nightclubs in Vancouver with my band, which might have been the Rocket Norton Band by this time. Seeds of Time for a while kind of branched out and became 2 other bands. One was the Rocket Norton Band. Another story. So I go down every Monday to the Bruce Allen office to pay my commission to the accountant there, whose name was Ernst. And he was a nice, really, really warm, nice older man. And I would go down and we'd chat. And, how are you, my friend? He'd say, and we'd talk. And then one day he had a massive heart attack and just died. It's gone, just like that. Now, Bruce had made partnership with Sam Feldman then, and they had expanded their whole operation, and they had all these bands playing around. They needed a bookkeeper, and so I went to Ernst's funeral. For some reason, I don't know why, it was completely out of character. Because I was too shy, especially in those days, to do stuff like that. But I did it, and I walked into the house of the widow with some flowers, and then I ended up in the kitchen where Bruce Allen and Sam Feldman were talking, drinking, and I walked in. The first thing Bruce says, he looks at me and says, "Rocket, what about your dad?" And I went, look, and kind of confused at first. And then I realized what he was saying, like they needed a bookkeeper like right away. And I went, oh, well, yeah, I think he might be. Yeah, okay, well, let me ask him. And so Bruce says, well, when you talk to him, make sure he understands, the language we use there, and all that. And I said, oh, okay, I'll ask him. So I went and said to my dad, I said, they're looking for a guy like you. But I'm supposed to say, they use pretty foul language down there. And my dad looked at me and said, well, I was in the Navy.
Not to mention the car business.
Not to mention the car business. But anyway, so he took the job and he worked there till after retirement age.
Wow. Yeah, I did meet him a couple of times, and he always struck me as a very wonderful guy.
Real sweet guy. Real sweet.
Yeah, everybody liked your dad.
Yep.
Okay, so that's great. So now, so Seeds of Time morphing into PRiSM just sort of happened just because it was just everybody sort of knew everybody. You have now Bruce Fairbairn was in the Sunshine Band, correct, with Jim Balance. That was their connection.
Yeah.
And the Sunshine Band must have been a late 60s, early 70s band as well, correct?
Yeah, Fairbairn was originally the trumpet player in a big R&B band. I think it might have been called the New Breed, maybe not. Spectre, maybe it was Spectre. He was a trumpet player in the band, and he was at music school. He was at university in economics. Jim Valance was at university, I think, in music, and so they were friends. And I guess they started up this. Bruce was really good at organizing things, and he got some kind of a government grant to get this like a street band together, like a marching band with a tuba. I mean, the little band, like and that's what, and Lindsay Mitchell ended up joining that band. So
like what?
He would play acoustic guitar.
Oh, really?
Or maybe mandolin, because Lindsay Mitchell's a really great mandolin player. Anyway, they would just walk around, in the streets of Vancouver. Valance had I guess he had either a snare drum. They had somebody on like a bass drum. They had a tuba player, sax. I think it changed. I think it had a lot of moving parts. But that was Sunshine, the Sunshine Band, and so in a sense, the PRiSM came out of the Seeds of Time, the Sunshine Band, and a little touch of the Rocket Norton Band. all the same, the usual suspects, gathered in a room, and we all looked around and went, "Hey, we're the Seeds of Time with a different singer," and that was in fact the truth.
And now let's move ahead to the end of the Ron Tabak era of PRiSM, and now we get Henry Small in. Now, how did that all come about? And with the Henry Smalls, so with the Henry Small Band, you were part of it. Lindsay Mitchell was part of it. Was Al part of it?
Yes, he was.
And then Henry Small. So it was a 4-piece or was it 5-piece?
Yeah, John Hall dropped out. He didn't feel that we should continue without Ron. But what happened is that Henry Small was considered one of the best, if not the best, singer in the country. Now he might have American status as well, and his voice is just, the instrument is unbelievable. Mm-hmm. And so Bruce Allen, he recognized that we had an emergency here. We had a huge record deal with Capitol Records, Capital EMI worldwide. In fact, it was the biggest record deal signed in the world in 1981 or two. Can't remember. 82, I think. It was like an 8-album deal, lots of money. I mean, we had so much success by that time, you know. Bruce thought, okay, I got to replace this incredible singer, Ron Tabak, with something incredible. And so he brought in Henry Small. And Henry came in and tried to completely take over. An out-and-out dictatorship. Like, there was no room for any discussion about anything. He wanted to choose the songs. He wanted to write the songs, although he did some writing with Lindsay, or choose the songs. The rehearsals were just ridiculous. We'd play the same song for 50 times over and over and over again. It took me quite a while to realize that, like many dictators, he wanted to tell everyone what to do, but he had no idea what that was. So to cover that up, there was a lot of vibrato, a lot of, you know, he's not a big guy, you know, so, but he comes across like a real tough guy, you know, and he did that. Like, so he intimidated everybody, and it only took a few weeks. Well, no, maybe a few months. So John Hall left right away. Then I can't remember the order of Lindsay or Al. Lindsay left and Al left, and I was the only one left. And I wanted to leave, and Bruce Allen, who Bruce and I had become pretty good friends, and he said, "You can't go. I can't do this without you." So I tried to stay. So I went down to LA to audition new guys for the PRiSM Band, completely against all of my better judgment. But as I said to Bruce that I would stay, and he was my friend. So I got there to SIR, the big rehearsal and rental place on Sunset Boulevard, and walked in, and I see all these bass players there warming up, all the guitar players doing their thing, and okay, that's great. And I looked over and I saw 4 or 5 drummers there with sticks, you know, going tap, tap. Well, that's kind of odd. And then I heard music, and I went closer to one of the rooms, and I could hear the band playing like "Don't Let 'Em Know," or one of the songs off the new album we did with Henry Small, which was called "Small Change." And I realized there was a drummer playing and all that, and I went in, and everything stopped, and I said, "Henry, we need to talk." Right? Pulled him out, and anyway, I said, a long story short, I said, "Henry, this ain't gonna work, so it's all yours." And that was it. I was the last guy. I came home. This is the end. This is how that era of my life ended. So I came back on the plane not having any idea of where I could go, what I could do now. I had no education, so I had no credentials to get a job. How can I put this? I was quite a popular drummer, but I was never very good. I never got very good at being a drummer. And so there wasn't a lot of other bands stepping up going, "Hey, we'd love to have Rocket in our band." No, I don't know whether I just never really followed up on that or what, but that I think is pretty accurate. So I come home and I walk into my house, and my girlfriend of 8 years says, "I'm leaving you."
Oh, God.
So the picture in my mind, it's not exactly factual, but it sums it up, of me walking into an empty house and sitting on my suitcase all by myself. So that was the end of the PRiSM Band.
Wow! I mean, talk about door closing in a big way. Holy snap.
Yeah, it was smashed my face right in. You know, lots of plastic surgery.
Now, okay, but now somewhere there's a crisscross there, because that's where me and you come in, where you mentioned earlier, where you came out to sort of watch me play guitar to see if I could play with the Rocket Norton Band, or probably with the Ron Tabak Band, which you had formed. So you were out actively trying to get Ron Tabak a record deal using songs from the band you had with Jeff Neal, Donnie Underhill, John Hall, and yourself, The Hun.
And some other songs. We had some other songs,
and
too.
some other songs, and you were using those songs to shop a deal for Ron. So what's the timeline there? Were you not still working in the Henry Small Band doing that? I mean, the Henry Small version.
Yes.
The Henry Small version of PRiSM.
I got to think about that, because when Ron called me up, this was before the whole breakup that I just described. Ron called me up and said that he wanted to now, so he had gone through a period of trying to get himself together, which I think he did. He picked himself out of the gutter, put it that way. And he was on the road to repair. And he called me and he said, I really want to carry on a solo career now. And he asked me if I would not only be part of it, but he wanted me to manage it. And so there I was, trying to keep the PRiSM thing together. But I said, this sounded like a pretty good opportunity. And so I said yes. And so formed the Ron Tabak Band with I think it was John, wasn't it? John Hall and you and Donnie Underhill. And was that it? That was it.
Yeah, essentially it was the Hun Band with Ron singing and me on guitar, because Jeff was in Streetheart by that time.
Right. Okay. And so some demos had been recorded with Ron singing, and I sent them out and had quite a bit of interest, and had been offered a deal. And I can't really go into the details of what happened, but the company all of a sudden mysteriously reneged. It was like shocking. So that was kind of the end of the pursuit of that. Ron,
reading between the lines, I would say it's because you got a deal with the old singer from PRiSM while there's an active PRiSM out there.
Yeah, whatever it was. I know what it was, but I don't feel comfortable in saying it. So Ron kind of disappeared again. And then that whole PRiSM breakup thing happened that I just described. So where I had to go from there is I spent a good summer just being a midnight rambler. I mean, I just partied. I had a good, I was a 32-year-old, 6'2", 180-pound rock and roll drummer, bachelor. Yeah. You can imagine the trouble I got into. Yeah. And I did that for probably a year with no, I played some gigs. There was some gigs around, and I would put bands together to do gigs and sort of kept life going, but I had no direction or anything. Then I met my wife, with love at first sight. We were engaged in 1 week, and we'd been married for almost 40 years.
Where did you meet B, by the way?
We were formally introduced by a mutual friend who came to the introduction as a chaperone.
What?
Yep. I was in a restaurant.
In Vancouver?
In Vancouver. I was sitting there with the chaperone, who was a radio DJ, really successful radio DJ. We were sitting there, and he had arranged this. He talked to both of us about it separately and then made this rendezvous. She came into the restaurant, walked around the corner. I saw her. That was the end of my roustabout life right there.
Well, because she's a Saskatchewan girl, correct?
Yep, we've been together ever since.
And so, when did B move from Saskatchewan to Vancouver, or had she?
Around about the late 70s, around 78, I think.
And what was she doing when you met her?
She worked in the healthcare system. She was a nurse working at the old tuberculosis hospital, which I think was a hospital for veterans down on Oak Street. And so that's what she did for a job. And other than that, she was a party girl. So she was a party girl. I was a party guy. And the snap of a finger, that all completely changed, and we became domesticated.
The first time I met Bea was at the Visions sessions in Mushroom. You brought me in to sing some backups on a song, and she was there at the session, or she walked in during the session. Because I remember she being quite struck by her. She was a lovely woman.
Oh yeah, fantastic girl. That's why we've had such a wonderful life together. Mm-hmm. So that was there I went from the empty house sitting on the empty suitcase, that whole thing, to, from rock bottom to the height of heights. And then I, from there on in, started to get my life together.
But now, once again, another crossover in your life, because before PRiSM died or was ended, you had formed the Hun on your off time. So you and John from PRiSM, with Donnie Underhill from Trooper, and Jeff Neal from my band, Shama, who had split up, and you guys started working together as the Hun.
Yeah.
And so that must have been, I'm saying, probably 1980 to 81, 82 in there? No, but 79 to probably 1980 to 81.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. And the only reason I know that is because I know when Jeff left, he was playing in Trauma with Jim Valance and Michael Sicoli at the time. And Jeff left it. He got an audition with Sweetheart. He took it, moved to Winnipeg, and I started playing with Trauma. And shortly after is when you came out to see if I would be worthy of playing guitar with Rock Norton Band. Now, the interesting thing is I still have a poster from that. I'm going to see if I can bring it up during this interview somewhere. There's a poster from us playing, I think, at Whispers in North Vancouver. And back then, I know that you were still part of PRiSM because you were not allowed to use your own name. So you went by Mac Knife. And it was Mac RN Knife.
Yeah. I remember that now. The Hun band was very interesting because one of these casual gigs that I was doing all the time, like people would call me and just say, we got this gig. Can you put a band together? I had all the guys. I had the Bill Henderson and, guys from, from all the local Trooper and PRiSM and a lot of the local musicians who were really great and never went on to big recording things. And I had all these guys and I just phone them up and say, we got a gig Saturday night. We're doing a boat cruise, $200 each or whatever, and we just show up and play all the old R&B songs. No rehearsals or anything, but I did get a gig somewhere. It was and I think it was a week-long gig. So I was looking for a guitar player, and the booking agency, the Feldman agency, they said, "Oh, this kid played with Shama. They just broke up, or was it Trauma? It was Shama.
Shama, yeah.
And they said he's just kind of at liberty." And I said, "Okay, send him over." And Jeff walks in to the rehearsal studio that I had in the house, and all 6'5" or 6 of them. I mean, I'm 6'2". I was looking up at him, and he was just the nicest guy I'd ever met. And they started playing. He was fantastic. So we did the gig. Well, the first night of the gig, the singer, who was Kenny McCall, turns around to Jeff, and he's in the gig, and he just says, "Hey, you got anything? You have anything you want to sing?" Like that, that's how casual the whole thing is. And Jeff, he's always so modest and everything. Well, maybe I could probably maybe do something. And he said, "Well, I really I do this Dylan song, like a Rolling Stone. I could do that." So, okay, ladies and gentlemen, Jeff Neal. And Kenny probably goes off and gets a beer. And so we played this song. Both John Hall and I were blown away. Just the performance was we were just like, this is incredible. So, of course, I got his number and everything. And a few days later, John said, he asked me for his number. He called him up, and the two of them got together and started writing songs. And then I said, well, that sounds like great fun. So I brought over like a snare drum and a hi-hat, and I started sitting in. And I went that night to a local Mexican restaurant with Donnie Underhill. We used to like to do this, and drank the bar dry. And during that time, I told him about this. So the next day, unannounced, Donnie Underhill shows up with a little amp in his bass, and he just sits down and starts playing along. And we're all in John Hall's basement. And they were sitting down there with the Spiders and and we're dust cutting, we're playing. And it grew out of that. And so then we thought, we started writing songs, and we rented quite a big space out in Burnaby, like with full sound system, like staging, sound system, the whole thing, because we had money. We were young guys with money. Bad combo. We started writing all these songs. And then we thought, well, these songs are pretty good. We should record them. So off we went into Mushroom Studios and recorded 5 songs. And we thought, these are pretty good. We're pretty good. We should do some gigs. So Donnie was going off and playing in Trooper, and John Hall and I were going off and playing in PRiSM. Jeff was just, still at Liberty. So we would come back and we would start to do the occasional gig. And Jeff was just, the guy was amazing. And I was envisioning us as an actual band. And I could see us on the big stages, because that's the stages I was playing on. I was playing on the big stages then, in the big arenas. And so I could see this band. And I saw him as kind of the Jim Morrison kind of guy with a guitar. He's left-handed. Out front, and then John Hall with his mountain of keyboards, and I had this huge big drum set up with timpanis and tubular bells and all this other stuff. And so he was like the star, and we were like the band. So after we played a gig somewhere, Donnie Underhill, John Hall, and I got together in one of our rooms, because I can't remember where we were, but we were on some hotel. And we all admitted that this was it. This was our future. And we made a pact. We're going to quit PRiSM and Trooper, the three of us, and we're going to go out on the road with Jeff, and we're going to be this Hun band. And
which is a huge step, because back then Trooper and PRiSM were massive bands. At the very least in Canada, you were at the top. You guys were playing was the biggest
band of the year. We had just won the group of the Junos for band of the year, and Trooper was the incumbent. They had won the year before. Wow. So we were the 2 biggest bands in the country. This would have been huge news. And I went to a record company in Toronto. The president of the company was a friend of mine. And I said, I want you to hear this. I was there doing something else, probably some PRiSM, interviews or something. And so I went to see my friend. So he said, let me listen. Then I gave him the cassettes, put the cassette in this enormous sound system he had in his office, cranked it way up. And I listened to it, and he goes, hey, this is fucking great, And he turned it up even louder. And then we went out and we started touring around the facility. And it was blaring down the halls. And he came back and he said, what's the deal with this? And I told him, and so they wanted to sign it. So I had the 2 biggest alumni of the 2 biggest bands in the country, a record deal with one of the biggest record companies in the country. So we go storming down the hallway of our hotel room into Jeff's room, smash open the door. Jeff, we're going to quit our bands and we're going to be the Hun band. And Jeff looks up at us and says, I just joined Streetheart. And that was the end of the Hun band, which Jeff, Neil, to this day calls the greatest band that never was.
Yeah. Interesting. It's Jeff and I were always in touch. We've always been close. Even the band split up, but there was never there was never bad feelings really when the band split up. And Jeff and I were in contact. So I remember him laying a cassette on me of the Hun material. And I was working in a music store at the time and starting to work. And then, of course, and I had that. And I also had a demo tape of Mike, Jeff, and Jim Valance that they had done some stuff. But that Hun stuff, I still play it to this day. I find it just, it's still very cool music. It's still very cool. It's relevant, you know, and it's quite amazing. The sounds are great. You know, it's just, I don't know. I love the songs. I love the playing on it.
It's the biggest regret of my musical life.
Yeah.
But, you know, you can't hold water back. You know, when something is going to happen, it's going to happen. Mm-hmm. Something's up on my screen now. I don't know anything about computers, so okay, carry on.
That's good. So now we got to move on. Hold on. There's just so many aspects of your career because now, so the Ron Back Band is gone, pretty much, almost before it started, and PRiSM is gone, and so. What did you do? Because we started playing together with the Beatles band for Expo 86. So there's a whole period of time between, I'm going to say 81, 82, like about 4 years where you were just sort of, what? Were you, am I off? Were you possibly doing some work with Bruce Allen at that time?
No, I don't think so. You know, some of this stuff could be fuzzy in my memory, but I don't recall doing anything like that. I know one thing that I did during that period was the Visions, John Hall and Skip Prest,
right?
And
of course,
I wrote Visions, and then we went to the Vancouver Planetarium and said we want to play this live. We had discovered a young female singer,
yes.
Really great, Alicia Michelle, and we wanted to play it live. And because they do this light show thing, and they usually do it to Pink Floyd or something like that. And we said, well, we'd like to come in and play live to the light show. And they said, well, you can't do it because the light show is all on computer. So we went, oh, well, okay.
It has to be timed with each bar of music, yeah.
So it's all programmed to do a record. So John Hall said, well, just a minute, how do you do that? And they did it on a reel-to-reel 8-track. And they had the 2 tracks were on Synthi timecode. And then 2 tracks were the stereo music. And then I guess the rest of it, anyway, that's how they ran it. They ran it from that. And he said, John Hall said, well, wait a minute, we could do that. We had an 8-track, not 8-track, a reel-to-reel 8-track machine. And he said, we can do that. We'll put Synthi timecode on, and we'll put a click track on, which is a metronome track. And the drummer, me, can play along to the click track. And as long as we don't make any adjustments to the arrangements, as long as we play it like bar for bar for bar perfectly from beginning to end, we'll be perfectly in sync with whatever you do. So we went back to them and they said, yeah, that would probably work. They actually had lab technician type guys in white lab coats working in the back room, and and they went, yeah, that'll work. So we did that, and we performed. We did 6 shows a week at the planetarium, 300-seat planetarium, for 7 weeks. So we sold out 42 shows, all on the strength of CFOX radio, FM radio, and a lot of curiosity, I think, of people going, well, we love those light shows they do with Pink Floyd. This is, to our knowledge, this had never been done anywhere in the world, where a live band had played in sync with a light show in a planetarium. People had played in planetariums before. Paul Horn did it in Vancouver. Ultravox did it in London, but not like a whole. There was a whole story involved with the light show. So we did that. Then I ran into a financier who loved this thing, and he said, "Why don't you record it?" And I said, "Well, because it'll cost $100,000." And they said, "No problem. We'll put it together." And so these guys put all the money together, and we went into the studio and recorded the Visions album with the Vancouver Symphony. It was all done. The symphony was done in one day at Little Mountain Sound. So we had it scored. Bob Buckley did the score for it, wrote the whole score out. And then we did the live performance at the Queen E, the one I was talking about where David Steele came out doing the Chuck Berry thing and brought the house down. And it was an enormous success. So I was doing things like that. I did a lot of TV work. I got myself in at CKVU, a local TV station. And I got myself in with the CBC. So when they were doing variety shows, which they did a lot of in those days, because CBC was given too much money by the government and didn't know what to do with it. So they put on variety shows. They had dancers and everything. It was incredible. And I did a lot of work on stuff like that. I did a lot of convention shows, putting bands together for conventions. And then Expo happened. I put all kinds of bands together for Expo, including Revolver.
Right.
And
the Shoes.
We were the Shoes. That's right. Yeah. I know we had remember we did songs by the Beatles or by anyone who influenced the Beatles.
Right.
Because we didn't have enough songs, so we were doing Everly Brothers songs and that was funny.
I think we did a run through one day at your house in Kitsilano and just went through a bunch of songs. Okay, good. Next, good. Next, okay. So
you and Mike knew all the songs. So Skip Preston and I had learned to play drums playing Longaringo. So I just inherently just knew it. I just knew how to play them.
Well, you certainly did play that stuff really well. I haven't seen anybody pull that stuff up like you did. It was you always found the right nuances to put onto those drums to make the songs happen.
I guess that's what happens. You learn to play that way. But that band, which we, as you know, we ended up calling Revolver. So many people said, "You are the best Beatle band in the world," that we just started calling ourselves that. We weren't the best Beatles show because we didn't have $100,000 or $1 million to put together, some of the shows that are out there. In fact, it ended up on Broadway, I think. Didn't Beatlemania, the show, end up on Broadway?
Yeah, actually, I forget the
big shows, but we were the best band.
Well, who said that was Rick Nielsen and Robin Zander when we played.
That's right.
They actually stayed backstage. They watched our first half of our show. I met them out front. I went to change into my regular clothes, went out front, and they said, "Hey," I said, "You want to meet the guys?" So they came back to the dressing room. Everybody shakes hands. And I think you said, "You want to play with us? You want to do our encore?" And they said, "Sure." So they stayed back and drank and ate our rider, I guess, while we were doing the second act. And then they came up and did the encore. But nobody really even knew they were in the room because they had just arrived, saw our first show, and they were in the dark. And all of a sudden, Cheap Trick is playing with Revolver for the encore. It was fantastic. And then that's what Robin Zander says. He said, we travel everywhere, all over the world. We go to see every Beatles band we've ever seen, and you guys are the best we've ever seen anywhere.
Yeah, well, I in retrospect, it was true.
Yeah,
and so that was a wonderful period. Now, we didn't play all the time. I mean, we were hardly ever a full-time band, but whenever we did, it was just brilliant. I just loved that.
Yeah, it was fun.
You and Mike Ciccoli were brilliant in that band. Skip Press did the guitar playing part. Just the feeling that we had. We captured the feeling. The funny thing is, Jim Valance, who we've mentioned quite a few times, just incredible musician, incredible drummer, songwriter extraordinaire,
and a walking Beatles anthology.
And a Beatles anthology. And he knows everything about the Beatles there is. He came to see us one day, one night when we played somewhere. He came up to me after and he said, "You played everything like nobody could play it better than that." And I walked away going, I never even listened to the records. I don't play those parts anywhere near what Ringo plays. And I make mistakes, but I played it like Ringo would play it if he was here today. And that's what fooled everybody. People used to come up and say, "You look exactly like him." You know, I'm the least person that looks like Ringo in the world, you know, but it was all this attitude. And I think the whole band had that. I think that whole band had that attitude. We just nailed that stuff.
You're being a little humble because there's one thing about your drumming that's absolutely remarkable. And I remember you creating things that didn't exist. Like you do the opening to Sgt. Pepper, and you would have a shaker, a maraca taped to your drumstick so that you would shake it up into the overhead as you're going boom, bang, boom. And you're getting the shuka, shuka, shuka while you're playing the straight beat. And it was like, it sounded like the record. You were playing all the parts all at once. And you did stuff like that all the time. So you're being quite humble, you know. I gotta give you kudos where they you were quite remarkable in that band.
Well, isn't the desperation the mother of all invention or something? I don't know if it's anyway. Well, thank you for that.
Yeah. But anyway, so now Revolver. Now you had started. I remember we were on the road with Revolver, and you were researching how to write a book. I remember you because we talked one day. We were somewhere in Saskatchewan or something on the road, and you said it's interesting. Somebody says I read this thing that if you're going to write a novel, what you do is you find your characters and learn and write everything about that character, where they went to school, what their parents were like, that character, then this character. And once you have all those people, the story will write itself.
Yeah, that's right.
Because they know exactly how each character is going to act in a given situation.
That's right. And they'll do all the dialogue too. You don't even have to invent the dialogue.
Yeah. Yeah. And I found that fascinating and enlightening, and it makes sense. It makes total sense. And then of course the outcome of that was an autobiography. But since then you've done done fictions.
Yes. But I wrote the first book. Many people had been saying for years, "Oh, you got to write all these stories down. You got to write a book." And I always said, well, it's just a collection of stories by a guy who's not really famous. So who cares, about these things? If Gordie Howe writes a book, everybody cares what breakfast cereal he has because he's Gordie Howe or Mick Jagger or any famous person. And so I rejected the idea. And then one day I came up with the ending. And the ending, well, I won't tell you what it is. So I came up with the ending. And when I had the ending, I wrote the whole autobiography like it was a novel. So all of the real people who appear in that book are all characters in the book. And I'm the protagonist. I'm the lead character. Mm-hmm. And it's fitting because for most of my life, I was a supporting, I was like the fly on the wall. I was in the room. I was there when all these things happened, but I wasn't an instigator. I didn't tell the jokes. I didn't write the songs. I was always in the background. But I took it all in, and all that went into the book. So it's an autobiography, but it reads like a novel. Yes. And after I wrote it, and it was very successful, so it sold really well. In fact, oddly enough, it still sells to this day. But that aside, after I finished it, I thought, well, I can do this. Because half a dozen times during the writing of it, more, a dozen times or more, as I was writing that first book, I would stop and say, "Well, I can't do this. I can't write a book. What am I thinking?" And then I just kept doing it, and then it turned out really well. So I thought, okay, well, maybe I can do this. I have a story. It was there was a true life what we call an inciting incident that happened not to me, but around me. And I thought, you know what? That's a movie. So I decided that rather than write it as a screenplay, which is very, very difficult, I could write it as a novel, which I felt comfortable doing. And so I did. I wrote my first novel. And now I've written 4 more since then.
So what's the names of, for the people tuning in, what's the names of all the novels? Okay, so the first one is Lost in Space, the Rocket Norton story.
Yep. Then I wrote something called Live, Love, Die. It's kind of a suspense intrigue. The lead character is a woman, young woman.
Is that the one you're talking about?
Live, Love, Die.
Yes.
Yeah.
Is that the one you're talking about that's like a sort of based on a real life?
No. What I was talking about is Lost in Space. That I wrote it as a novel.
No. You mentioned something about something that happened around you that you wrote a story.
Oh yeah. This thing happened that I just happened to be there for. It was a very dramatic thing, and I'm not giving it away to anyone because they should read the book.
Is that and that is Live, Love, Die?
Live, Love, Die. Okay. And this young woman. We don't know whether she's for real or whether she's lying or what the deal is. And all the characters are basically doing the same thing. So it's very interesting novel. Then I wrote a comedy. I wrote a comedy called He Was More Than He Seemed, about a man, an older man that can converse with machines. He can, like, just common machines, toasters, vacuums, and he works in an appliance repair shop in New York because he can. A blender comes in, doesn't work. He just says, "Oh, well, he can talk to it, right?" And so he was very good at it. Well, some really extraordinary things happened to this guy. So that's that one. Then it's a total comedy. Then I wrote a book called Torch. That takes place in just post-World War II, in the late 1940s, mostly in New York, a bit in South Carolina, and a bit in Hollywood. And it's about four characters, boy, girl, of mixed race, and how they're singers, they're actors, and what happens to them, and how they interact with each other and what happens to them in the end. Then I wrote a baseball book that ended up becoming. It was too difficult to write the whole story. I've still got it. It's about a baseball game played by all the top players in history.
Wow.
And it's not like Field
of Dreams.
Field of Dreams. This is more like these were all like the Babe Ruth and Ty Cobb and all players, and how they come together to play an actual game. The whole book is this game, and it's been there's the main characters in the book are these 6 fans sitting in the stands, and the interaction. They're all serious baseball fans, so they all know everything about baseball, and they're talking and they have relationships going. So during the game, there's all this relationship thing happening with these six fans, and there's interaction with the players themselves. So Roger Hornsby might come out, to start yelling at them about something. And, I know a lot about the history of these players, so there's a lot of character involved in them. But I never really finished the story, so I ended up turning it into a textbook, which is called The Real Best All-Star Baseball Team of the 20th century, by the numbers. And see, I'm a statistics nut, So I went through all the statistics in baseball. The thing that's beautiful about baseball is that everything that happens in the game is recorded. Everything. Names of the umpires, how much wind is blowing, where, we got a southwesterner, westerly at 14. Everything is kept in stats. So you can go through this whole thing. And I invented a formula for comparing the guy that played baseball in the 30s with a guy that played baseball in the 90s. Because anyway, and it's pretty cool. And same thing with pitching. And so that and those are the books I read, and the book that I've written, and I've read other books. And my new book that I'm doing exactly what you just described. I'm in that process right now. I'm going through the characters, the protagonist, the antagonist, the main characters, the secondary characters, and I'm going back to where they were born, where they went to school, what happened to them on the playground and when they were 6 years old, who their parents were, when they died, if they're everything about them. And it takes place in 1970 in New Orleans, and the setting is very musical. There's a band, but it's not about music. It's not about the band. The band just happens to be people involved in this story. But it's not about the band or anything like that. So it's not one of those kinds of stories. It's about this couple. And anyway, I didn't really have a title for it. And I was talking to someone about something completely unrelated. And they were talking about going dancing or something. And I looked at them very seriously and I said, drummers don't dance. And which I believe. Ringo can dance, but other than that, forget it.
Musicians can't dance.
And the person I was talking to said, now that's a great title for a book. And so that's going to be the title of my new book.
Right.
Drummers don't.
But you know what? What's remarkable about that wonderful brain of yours, Rocket, is how you see opportunity in everything. Because now you've mentioned baseball here, and of course, one of the other things. Now, when you married B, you inherited a stepson, who
he was 4 years old.
Yeah, and who got involved in baseball, and you started coaching his team, and you saw that there was a lot of things that other coaches could learn from. So you started an entire series of videos for that.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, the main thing, and it's not just baseball, is that what I discovered as a dad who got strong-armed into coming in and coaching the team with the classic line, if you don't do it, there won't be a team. Right. The guilt trip. Well, okay, I'll do it. And they were just really young. They were like 6. They were the little guys playing t-ball, And so I didn't really have to have a lot of baseball knowledge at that point. I knew baseball. I played baseball, but I hadn't really thought about baseball in many years at this point. What I recognized immediately was that the parents coaching the teams, who were pretty much all dads, there were some moms, it was all about them. How they were being seen by their neighbors, and so they had to win the games. Because they had to, otherwise they felt, this is what I witnessed, or this is how I perceived this, is that people would think that they weren't doing a good job because they didn't win the games. And I was going, well, there's something wrong with this. So my very first game, it was so disorganized that I was standing at the sidelines, like in front of the dugout there. And this guy comes running across the field and says, "You're supposed to come out and toss the ball to your hitter." And I went, "Oh!" And then the guy looked at me. "Don't you know what you're doing?" I said, "No, I don't. I'd rather be in the nightclub playing some old Beatles song." Anyway, so we lost that game 26-0, and sure enough, as I was dragging the bag of equipment back to the car, and all the parents were yelling at me, and all the kids were crying, I said to Beat, "I quit. I'm not going to do this. This is awful. It's no fun." So I got home, had a cocktail and said, well, okay, I'm going to figure out how to do this. And that's when I started to recognize the problem is that parents get involved and they see it all about them, where it's all really just about two things. It's about children having fun and learning a new skill. And I decided right then and there, I don't care if I ever win a baseball game ever again. And for 3 years, I never lost another game. The kids just love playing. They just had so much fun. I never in a game ever said, well, maybe that's too dramatic a statement, because it took me a while to hone this and realize and turn this into an application. But I never yelled at kids during the game. Like if their batting stance was wrong or their swing was wrong, which of course would be there. I ended up coaching Kale until he was 12, and that's when Little League ends. And then I stayed on, and I coached for another 8 years or so. So just, as a volunteer, not as a parent. Because by this time, I had recognized this, that they got to have fun. Don't yell at them. They're just here to have a good time. But teach them the skills. Teach them how to play. Teach them how to hit the ball. Because it's a very, very difficult thing to do. And very young children can hit the ball doing it all wrong, because the pitchers are not very good and the fielders muff the ball. So it's an error, but they call it a hit. But I would say to them, I'd say, well, that's fine. Yeah, okay, I know you're hitting the ball now. But in a couple of years, if you want to keep playing, when it really starts to get fun, the pitchers are going to be really good, and you're not going to be able to hit them because you've got a hole in your swing. And a lot of the kids would say, I don't care. I know what I'm doing. And I go, okay, well, that's fine. You just keep doing it. But most of the kids wanted to learn. They wanted to learn a new skill. They're never going to go be baseball players. They're not going to go into the major leagues. But what was important to me is that I would teach them the correct way to play, how to field the ball, how to throw the ball, how to hit the ball, how to pitch, so that when they were parents, they would teach their kids the right way. So they wouldn't pass on, bad information, which actually, when you think about it, is what we were talking about at the beginning with school, how they keep teaching us about history, but they don't teach us the whole thing. So I stayed on, and I ended up creating a video called "How to Coach Baseball to Kids." And this video was aimed at parents, not at the players. And it went into all the skills and how to do these things, how to play first base, how to play left field, how to do all these things. It wasn't complicated. I didn't go into the baseball is a game it's like golf. You'll never ever master it.
Yeah.
It's just too hard to do. But you have to know the basics of it, and that's what we sold thousands of these videotapes. There were videotapes then, mostly to in the United States. Some in Canada too, but it was really popular in the U.S.
Oh, well, I was just talking with Keith Scott, and he's talking about his kids being raised down near San Diego. And, he said, like, the kids in our neighborhood, like, one's gone to the major leagues. He said they take their sports so seriously down here. It's like major money and major just,
Well, it's a hockey in Canada. As I understand it, like, hockey is, I never coached anything else other than baseball. Kale played soccer, he played basketball at the highest level in the university. But baseball was the only game I knew. And I understand that in hockey in Canada, the whole thing is just over the top. Mm. I mean, they fist fights in the stands, and I saw it in soccer too. People get so mad at the ref. I've seen dads chase. Are they referees or umpires? What are they called? Referees. Into the parking lot, into their cars, wanting to beat them up. Over some fault. And
it's insane. What message is that sending to the children that are playing the game?
Yeah. Well, you see it everywhere.
That's where I played just a little bit. I played hockey when I was young. My dad wanted me to play hockey. He spent an enormous amount of money, put me through figure skating lessons, everything. I was a good defenseman. But my dad said he realized the day that I wasn't going to be a hockey player. And I remember I was skating backwards because I could skate backwards as fast as I could skate frontwards because of figure skating. And I'm skating backwards as a defenseman, and there's a forward coming towards me, and he made the big mistake. He was looking at his puck. So I just stopped. And he ran into me and went back and knocked himself out. So everybody comes down to the boards. I skate over to my dad. My dad's there to tell me, hey, great play. And I'm crying because I'd hurt the kid. And he went, that made me realize he'd never be a hockey player. He says, your heart's too big, you know.
Yeah, it's a tough game. That's a real tough game. But yeah, these children's sports need to be. In fact, I had a review from the Library Association in the United States had like 200,000 libraries, and this was the organization that oversaw the whole thing in America. And they wrote a review because they wrote reviews on videos and books, I guess, too. But anyway, videos. And they wrote a review on it. And it said in the review, this video should be required viewing by every coach in every sport.
Oh, it's not nice.
Fantastic. Yeah. So we sold quite a few thousand of them after that came out.
Wow. It's fabulous. It's like, you know, and there's so many aspects of the number of careers. Like, you're a great bunch of guys, right? And it's like you've had, like, we're doing concert promotion for quite some time and bringing in the Glenn Miller Orchestra and all that stuff. And that was a huge success as well. And not to mention your car business. You know, everything you have done seems to have been an amazing success.
Well, guess I better keep doing it. I don't know. It's thank you. Thanks for saying that. I don't know. I just do what I think I mean, life is every day. We come to forks in the road. You know, you got to make choices. Some of them are good and some of them aren't. You know, I've had lots of disappointments. And very few regrets. I was saying that, you know, the Hun band it's a regret. I think it's more of a disappointment because I didn't actually cause it to not happen. It would have happened. It was circumstance that caused it. Not it's timing and circumstance. Those are disappointments. And we all have disappointments, and you have to move on. You know, you just move on and do something else.
Well, look at the stuff you're facing right now, and you've actually turned it into something incredibly positive. You know? Well,
it's when you're in your doctor's office and he says, or she in this case said, you know, you've got metastasized stage 4 cancer, you're going to be dead in 6 months. That wakes you up, you know. And I basically have said, it's kind of like, no, I don't think so. I don't want to do that. I don't want to die in 6 months. So that was a year and 4 months ago. And that's how the Fuck Cancer benefit concert got born.
Another amazing success.
Well, not really thanks to me, but thanks to all the people that got involved. Because when I was originally, my original cancer was colon cancer, and that was about almost 2.5 years ago. They said they would take care of that, which didn't happen. And that's how the cancer came back, and now it's doing this. But originally, I went through 3 surgeries, radiation, and 12 chemotherapies, which are brutal. I called each one 5 days in hell. And I got them every 2 weeks. So I only had a few decent days. And even those days were not that great. Right near the end of that, I figured, you know, at the end of the first chemo, I figured I was going to be, you know, out of the woods. And I wanted to give something back. I wanted not to the overall, necessarily to the overall system because it's so huge, But the people that treat you when you have cancer, the nurses and the technicians, and are so kind and they're so caring. You go in to get this poison pumped into you, and they're just so careful with you. And I thought, I got to do something. Flowers, candy, and something, just to say thank you. And so I thought I would get together a few of the old crowd. We'd play a gig somewhere. And it was so informal. I was thinking, well, we'd pass the hat or something. Just, raise a couple of grand maybe, and buy them all some wine. I didn't even have a proper goal in mind. And then other musicians I was talking to, and they said, "Oh, I'd like to be on that." And the next thing you knew, I had a theater booked, 500-seat theater. And I go, "Oh, this is pretty scary," I was like. So then more musicians came forward and said, "Well, gee, I'd like to do that too." And so I had to move out of that theater and move into an 1,100-seat hard rock theater out in the suburbs. And by this time, I had Loverboy, Trooper, PRiSM, Chilliwack, Lee Aaron, Headpins, Nick Gilder, Powder Blues, and Sweetheart. And they all came. They all played for nothing. Everybody came and we put on this big concert, and we raised $344,000. It just blew my mind. I thought I was going to, raise a few $100, and here we did this. And every musician at the end of that night came to me and said, "We're going to do it again, right?" Which was the farthest thing from my mind at that point. And I went, "Oh, wow, yeah, I hadn't thought of that." So, B and I went on our regular migration that we do every winter, and then I was thinking about it while I was there, and said, "Yeah, everybody wants to do it again. We do it again. We'll do it bigger. We'll do it better." And so now we're doing another one, and it's going to be in October this year in downtown Vancouver at a bigger theater. This in about 3 weeks, it's going to be announced, so it'll be a big splash.
Will you be able to put fuck on the advertising?
Well, I got it on. See, last year we sold the whole place out, and we never advertised. I didn't have any money to advertise. So Rock 101 Radio here in Vancouver, they just talked it up. The DJs just talked it up and said, "Oh, and I was on a couple of times, and I had Jeff Neal and Lee Aaron and Bill Henderson. I think had maybe Tom Lavin, a few guys go on, and that's all we did. I put up some posters. They got some posters made, and they said "fuck cancer" on it. But when I went on the radio, I would call it F cancer, and then I would say, and it's not F, so that. Wink, wink, nod, nod. And then one day I was on, and the DJ I was with, he just said, basically to himself, he said, "Fuck it." He said, "You gotta come to fuck cancer." He said, I don't know if he got into trouble for it or what, but anyway, we did it. So I'm doing it again on October 28th, and we're doing it at the Center for the Performing Arts in Vancouver. Pretty much everyone back with the addition of Colin James and Jim Burns.
Fantastic. What a
fantastic lineup. And much bigger, much better production values, although the first one, the production values were quite high. But this time I've raised more sponsorship money. We have a company called the Wheaton Precious Metal Corp. They have stepped up really big because in doing this, when I first started it, I want all the ticket money to go to cancer. I don't want to take anything out of the ticket money to pay for sound and lights and production costs and things like that. When someone pays $200 for a ticket, it's a donation. They're donating it to cancer. The concert is free. And that's what we're doing again. So I've got my sponsors and Wheaton at the head of the line right now. Um, that's the way we're doing it again. We're going to, we have a government, there's a government level that's going to match. We had this last year too. So if I can do $300,000 or $400,000 at the gate, I can donate $800,000.
Wow.
And it's all going to children's cancer.
Wow. That's unbelievable.
I got 3 minutes. I got 3 minutes, Mick, and I got to go.
Okay. Well, sadly, we're probably not going to be able to get into the pictures because we've got 69 pictures to go through too. Maybe we'll make that another time. I'll just call you next week and we'll go through the pictures. How's that?
That sounds great.
Yeah.
It's just a joy to talk to you, whether it's over a coffee or over the computer screen here.
I know we haven't been together in a long time. I mean, I live over in Victoria now, so it's hard to get together with anybody, you know.
Well, you're the best of the best. The hardest working man in rock and roll. That's what I call you.
Well, Rocket, thanks for everything. Thanks for making the time. I know you've got an incredibly busy schedule with all the stuff going on in your life. So, and my hat's off to you as always. Big hugs across the water here. And let's make a point. Let's make a point of going through these pictures because I really want people to see these.
Okay.
And I'd love to have you comment on them. It won't take too long, but it'll definitely put us over time on this. So.
Okay, we'll do that. We'll be in touch and we'll cue that up.
All right. Thanks, brother. Take care.
I love you, pal.
Love you too, buddy. Bye-bye.
Bye.